Hello, Pen.
Hello, Ros.
Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I've been really looking forward to this because as I'm writing about solitude and your book is subtly entitled Solo, so you're a really good person to talk to, yes. So for our viewers, this might give you another clue about what it is that Pen was doing solo, as he's generally looking icy. So rather than me introducing you, why don't I ask the expert to introduce you? Can you just give us the 2-minute potted bio?
Crikey. Okay, so I'm Pen Haddow, and I have spent nearly all my working life in the Arctic Ocean region, and I've come to be somewhat passionate about the comings and goings, particularly the goings latterly, of sea ice and the habitat that it provides to an astonishing array of plant and animal wildlife, which losing its habitat as the sea ice goes, raises all sorts of questions about how we should and can protect this ecosystem that hangs out around the North Pole.
So we both have the environmental aspect, and the other thing you and I have in common is spending long periods of time alone doing unpleasant things.
Well, yeah, there are moments when it's certainly deemed unpleasant, even by me. Yeah, I think, of course, there's some massive differences between what all of us are experiencing to a greater or lesser extent at the moment in terms of being more isolated and more distant from those around us than normal. But I would make the sort of fundamental point, in fact, for both of us, you and I, Ros, that we volunteered, and it was a privilege, in my view, to be able to put myself in those situations, and very much not a punishment. Not that it's a punishment for people now, but it was I volunteered, I opted in to do it. And of course, for all of us now, for the most part, we are being instructed quite reasonably to be more isolated than usual.
And Pen, had you always been happy in your own company, or was the solitude aspect of your trek to the North Pole, was that a challenge for you or not?
Of course, there's several layers of answer to that. I think the answer to your question is that I've always been happy with my own company, and I think, for speaking for myself, I can't speak for you, of course, but speaking for myself, it's always been a distinguishing feature, if you like, a point of differentiation from most people. I subsequently discover most people are absolutely non-understanding of why someone would want to put themselves into such an extremely isolated and in my case, a remote situation. And I also find that when I am on my own, I'm entirely happy with my own company. So it's complete. I think I can honestly say it doesn't involve any stress at all, which none. And I can flit, and have done, from a dinner party in London. 24 hours later, I'm in a pretty remote location on the edge of the Arctic Ocean, and 24 hours after that, I am properly isolated on my own. And equally, and I've switched from a highly socialized environment to one that's quite the opposite. And then I can flick a switch, and the moment I've spent 75 days alone, as I did on the Arctic Ocean back in 2003, I could be at a dinner party, and you would never know, and I would never really know that it doesn't take me weeks to get used to being around people. I'm sure I kind of know it does for some of us who do these sorts of things, but for me, I can just flick the switch, and I feel it's actually become a part of. I sort of thrive on having those two different modes of being. I think,
So maybe I can ask you about that. So what is it that you love about solitude that you don't get when you're in company?
again, massive question. In a few words, I think that one of the things is that it means that and I would suggest all of us, feel that all those pressures, all that monitoring, all that judging, all that self-comparison, all that I ought to be doing this, or I'm not doing this well enough, or hard enough, or long enough, or whatever, it all goes because only you're there. You know what you're doing. You have to live with that. And you can perform at the max, whatever that might mean. And when I say perform, behave in the way that you feel is most optimum for you, spiritually, physically, whatever. Or you can sort of, what would you do? Sort of deliberately attack your own being, as it were, and do something you don't want to do. Because it's not, because I'd say hide under a duvet for 3 days. Okay, well, hide under a duvet for 2 days. That's really what you want to do. You can do that. But I think for me, I just find it a massive, it's kind of like a release. I am where I am. I can do whatever I want. I happen to be, in the context of this conversation, about set off on a solo journey, shall we say. It's all down to me. I've got full control. It's me and it's the environment. And it's all the equipment that I've, and preparation that I've done. Those are 3 factors. Right, let's do it. And no one can affect it, which is not a good feeling if you're so used to being entirely dependent on lots of people supporting you in different ways. And it's liberating if finally you can basically be who you need or want to be.
Kind of radical self-reliance.
Yes, but it throws you back on who you really are, and again, like all things I've discovered, pretty much it's a process. So for the first few days, you go. It's like a lot of let's call them extreme experiences. Grief being one. There is a sequence or stages of reaction, emotional reaction to that situation, which are kind of you cannot rationally take on. Look, you can miss that stage 1. You're going to be in denial. So just know that, right? Let's move. We can go straight to stage 2. Right, you're going to be quite angry now. So, but you don't need to be angry. You can't. You have to actually go through these steps. You can just knowing it doesn't mean you can somehow fast track to the end. Right, acceptance. Now we can get on with the rest of our lives. You can't. It doesn't work like that. And I think when people are put for the first time into an isolated environment, such as we're experiencing now, you could all sorts of, I get, maybe there is a commonality to how people react, but, and I could see that also people are going to react in all sorts of different ways because they've never been like this before. But, and maybe denial's the first one. I'm going to go out for a much longer walk with 15 minutes. I need more. How can I possibly exercise and keep fit in less than 15 minutes outside? And deny. Not acceptable. And then maybe they get angry. Get angry with the government because actually, okay, some people die, but most of us are going to be fine. So, and then they go into the next phase. Now, I'm not saying it is the grief sequence, if you will, but maybe it's something like that. And eventually we come to accept it. And once you can get to that acceptance, you start to calm down. All that emotional stuff blocks useful thought. And then you can start to calm down and think, right, actually, this is an opportunity. I mean, I'm not having, for many people, they're not having to do as much as they usually do. Not everybody, of course. Some are having to work harder in their lives than ever before, in the NHS and so on. But for some of us, there is an opportunity. And the sooner one can get to realizing and accepting that there may be some upsides to this, that's a really powerful and, for many of us, unique period of our lives.
Yeah, and let's hope that people can relax into that enough to actually find the gifts rather than fighting against reality, I
Yeah.
hope. So it seems like you're somebody who has quite a good relationship with yourself. Like, you're quite a good friend. You quite like yourself. And I wonder if one of the reasons that some people really struggle with their solitude is because they haven't had an opportunity to make friends with themselves, and maybe they've got a particularly strong inner critic or other negative voices in their heads. I wondered if you ever had any voices come up for you that were maybe less than kind and nice to you when you were on the ice.
Well, excuse me.
It's kind of a personal question. Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Again, another massive question.
So tell me about your childhood, Pen.
Yes. What was the question again?
Did you ever struggle with like negativity?
Yeah, while being alone. Well, I can sort of answer that question off the top of my head in different ways. So as I walked, trekked, swam towards the North Pole over those 75 days, I had what I called a white parrot and a black parrot. Black parrot sat on this shoulder, the white parrot sat on that shoulder, and they were talking into the respective ears. And the black parrot would be saying, why are you doing this? Who cares? You might die. Your family depend on you more than you need to get to the pole. Blah 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 blah. The white parrot was saying, what? You've spent years preparing for this. That parrot, the black parrot, just trying to talk you out of it. That's the weaker you. And there are all sorts of reasons why you will benefit from and should, in inverted commas, carry on. And here's some plus sides, blah blah blah. So this conversation, white black, goes on. I would say it comes and goes. There'll be times, I guess, when things are more stressful. That's when the black parrot cranks up and says, this is a good opportunity to see if we can chip away at his resolution to keep going through this tough period. So that's one way in which, yes, I experienced negativity and so on. Another is that I realized over the 15 years, I very deliberately set up a guide service so that I would build up a body of work, a body of experience on the sea ice of the Arctic Ocean around the North Pole, that was a personal experience that would enable me to make it more likely that I could reach the North Pole solo without resupply. So many of my forebears, if you like, and peers even, would right, I'm going to go to the North Pole. And they set off, and they get X number of miles, and for whatever reasons would then give up. And like I say, they gave up, and I gave up twice in 1994 and 1998, but I kept going to that turn, succeeded in 2003. They gave up because they didn't die. So ultimately, they did give up and were collected and taken home. And the sum total of their experience would be, the 35 days or 10 days or 2 days that they spent on the Arctic Ocean. They'd never been there before. Now, some would go back again and have another go. So they've still only done the 5 days of the previous expedition, or 20 days. So it wasn't, and I think what I realized after my first expedition on the sea ice, which was in 1989, I realized this is actually it's a very technical, different environment. You can't just apply mountaineering principles to it, for example. And so, ergo, the more time you could spend up there, the better you would understand what you were dealing with, both yourself and your reactions to it, and what you were capable of, and what you needed to adjust and then tune up, and how the environment worked. Should you always break right whenever you come to some open water, because on the law of probability was you'd always come to a closing of the ice flows if you always went east, for example. Or is it utterly random, makes no difference, or whatever? So once you start to really understand the environment that you're in, then you can start to make sound, evidence-based, to use the phrase, evidence-based judgments, rather than, I think I'll go, right, that feels right, or worse still, most people, I feel, would go up there and they would rely very heavily on the crutch that is positivity. Whatever it takes, I'm Mr. or Mrs. or Miss Positive. I will get there because I'm blood and guts going to get there. That's the sort of person I am. Well, I would argue that you have to have that approach to reach one's goals in these in extreme situations. But if you depend on it too heavily, and it's not, and there's no foundation that it's on of experience and judgment, you don't really deserve to. You might get away with it. You might get lucky. You don't really deserve to get to the pole. You've got to put in the hours to build up your competence and therefore your confidence and therefore in total your capacity to do stuff in these moments. So probably getting a bit off message there, but I think
there's actually a really good point that you make there. But sorry, I interrupted you. Because thinking back on my 5 major voyages, the first one, I really, really, really struggled psychologically. Well, every which way, like logistically, physically. But it's the psychological part that really gave me hell. And some of what helped me was thinking, well, I'm learning a lot about how not to do this. I'm making such a hash of it in terms of managing my own inner dialogue.
Yeah.
That when I do a later one, I will know what not to do. So I know that for anybody in self-isolation at the moment, probably the last thing they want to think about is ever being isolated ever again in the future. But even as a thought experiment, I think it's quite helpful if we can be a bit more objective about it and go, well, this is a really interesting educational character building experience. And in the future, I know that I will be able to cope with this better if I choose to learn from what I'm failing at this time around.
Yeah. And that, of course, that ultimately, I would say that falls under the umbrella that I call a pioneering mindset. So it all, what you can and can't do begins and ends and is defined throughout by what you believe you can do, because that's it really. And for many of us at the moment, finding ourselves instructed to be more isolated and distant, you are in effect in a pioneering situation. You may not be pioneers, you may not have volunteered to be a pioneer. That's maybe not the sort of person or approach you have to life, of doing things differently and innovatively and pushing through and beyond and leading people and so on. But you're kind of there in a personal way. It's right, well, here you are, you're leader of your own ship, it's you, and all the wind's gone. You're like becalmed, aren't you, in a way? So what now? Well, you can just hide under your duvet and do something that maybe that's what you need to make. Need to rest. Finally, after 25 years of working intensively in whatever environment, people actually really use a rest, and not just a 2-week holiday, but rest is, I could imagine for many, is really valuable, but probably not for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks necessarily. And of course, simply not doing what you usually do is a change. And what's that phrase? A change is as good as a rest, something like that. Just doing something different, even though you could be just as busy, is actually quite refreshing. And so we're all sort of potentially in that situation as well. But coming back to this pioneering mindset idea, many of us finding ourselves in a pioneering situation because we haven't been here before. So
very true.
That's where the mindset comes in. Okay, there are 2 ways of going about this. Either you just do, in a sort of unconscious, spontaneous, intuitive way. I've got some time off. I'm going to watch a gazillion Netflix movies and catch up on that. Okay, well, there's nothing wrong with that, but the alternative approach is say, right, I know what I feel I want to do, but let's just, before I dive into that, maybe there's some way of stepping back and reflecting on what is the best use of this time rather than an obvious use of this time. Maybe that's the way of putting it. And that is actually quite hard to do that independently, just to sit down and think, outside the box. If you're not used to doing that sort of thing before, it's really hard. It's almost impossible. So that's when tuning into a YouTube or similar sort of platform and listening to, frankly, discussions like this, work off other people's experiences of being in these sort of situations. Exactly what we're doing here, because it's too much to ask people to. I couldn't do it, to suddenly sit down and right, I'm going to be pioneering. What does that even mean? How do you start? So I think reaching out to other people and dipping into their experiences is kind of key to beginning the process of how can we make what initially may seem as a nightmare, no income. I have personally, I've got no income. It all went in 3 days, right up and away until the end of September, last week of September.
I hear you. Yep.
So, okay, initial views, yikes. And then it's
to
okay.
That effect.
Yeah. And then right, what to do now. That's when it gets interesting. I mean, I think that many of us are really interesting, challenging, energized. We can either be chilled about it and think, well, what okay, some time we could do something we don't normally do because I've still got the income coming in, but I don't, I'm surrounded with my family, but I'm not used to for a long period of time, or I'm living on my own for a long period of time, whatever. What could I do? I've got the money coming in still, or enough of it. Here's a wonderful opportunity. And if you haven't got any money, and you can start thinking, well, what could I do? As the voluntary things I could do, as the ways of making money. Start buying. You've only got £5 left in your bank account. Right, we'll buy something for £4 on eBay. Cleverly, find the right thing and see if you can sell it for £5. Right, there's your first pound. You're trying to make income. You don't have to. You literally don't have to have any money at all. So. And that's just one simple example. If money is the problem, so where were we?
Actually, Pen, I'm very conscious that you've got another call in just a few minutes, so I'd just like to ask you for some quick and simple sanity savers, and I'll give you an example of the kind of thing that I mean. I love the way that in your book, the way you anthropomorphized. Yeah. I always found that word really hard. Some of the things that you had with you in the Arctic, like Mavis the sweeping brush, who very sadly died during your journey, Mr. Orange the immersion suit. So you had these things that were almost like your crewmates or your companions that you could talk with in order to hear your voice out loud. It sounds like that was quite a little sanity saving technique for you. I wondered if there were some other little sort of mental tips and tricks that you might be able to share.
Well, I like to think there are probably quite a few, but doing a deep dive into my mind is I'm not sure I can pull them up out of the well fast enough for us. But one of them I discovered, which I really felt was like wow, I wonder if anyone else has discovered this. And of course, it may just be that it worked for me. But I found that thinking a positive thought, shall we say, for example, basically positive thinking, is one thing. And it's like first base, key when you're under the cosh. However, saying it out loud massively amplified for me that feeling of positivity. So let's say I think, right, in my head I'm thinking, right, I've got one more sledging session to do today, 75 minutes. I'm how can I put this? I'm really cold, I'm really cold now. I've got no hot tea left. I'm just drinking sort of cold tea out of a thermos. And the sun's gone down, so almost the moment the sun goes below the horizon, if there's sun, it gets seriously colder on one, and it's all very difficult. But saying to yourself, but thinking, right, come on, Pen, in your mind, come on, Pen, just one more session, you can do this, you did it yesterday, why can't you do it today? It's all in your head. That's one thing. To say out loud, come on, Pen, you were fine yesterday and it was actually colder. You can do this. It's all just going on in your head. To actually be talking to yourself out loud, just saying those words, it seems to take the messaging, the wiring seems to be much more powerful. And suddenly, I'm up, I'm doing it. I'm doing this. I've got this. Whereas you can go round and round and round in your head, thinking positive thoughts, but not really believing it, or not really getting purchase in your actions. Whereas saying that out loud took it to a whole new level, and I found that really revelatory. I've never read it anywhere, but it's probably well known in psychological circles. But that's one little thing. So wandering around in your house saying, "I'm not going to do I'm well, not that I'm not. I am going to make something of today, and I am going to bake a cake that I've never baked before, and I can do this." Just saying it out loud, you may just find you're reaching into the cupboard for the flour, and it's happening already. Whereas if you're just sitting in the chair thinking, "I am going to bake a cake today. Yeah, I think I can bake a cake today. Come on, you can do that." That's not the same, not as powerful.
It's funny how quite independently I arrived at the same technique. Really? And I also found it really helpful if at the end of that rowing shift that I really hadn't wanted to do, if I went, "Well done, Rosie.
Absolutely.
You did it. Like, congratulations, good girl."
Yeah. It makes it real in some way, doesn't it? You hear the sound coming back, your own sound, but makes it real.
It's almost like your brain needs the information to go outside in order to come back in. Well, I'm really glad
that's one thing that I learned.
Worked for me too.
And I think the other thing I could add, if it's useful or helpful, is that during my expedition, I knew from that body of experience that I'd built up that there were 5 scenarios. I've got all 10 fingers, 4 fingers. They're all there.
And toes as well.
I won't, but yes, they're all there.
You're doing better than Rosie then.
Yes. So there were 5 scenarios that I knew always brought me down in my head. I mean, critically, to the point where you can go up there in the north when it's very extreme for weeks on end. It's unrelenting. You can go from "I've got this, I'm on schedule, I can do this. This is, I think this is going okay." Within 5 minutes, you can be reaching for the satellite phone, as in the last expedition. First, I had to have HF radios, and it's all much more complicated. You reach the phone and you say, "Do you know what? I'm done. I'm out of here." And you say, "Really?" "Yeah, really." For all sorts of reasons. So, I developed with a sports psychologist 5 different what I call tools that I had in my tool bag. That when I'm in situation A, I know this situation, I'd kind of mentally reach into my toolbox on my rucksack kind of thing and pull out the tool I needed, and I go through this mental routine that we'd worked out, and it would basically give me a lift. And specifically, to give you a specific example, and I'm saying all this because if you're living on your own or with your family and you're finding it really hard, and it's like you just go to the cake tin and when no one's looking, you pop into the larder or the fridge and you have a shave off a slice of the cake so that no one will notice that the cake's actually getting smaller, and all of this stuff because you're a bit depressed.
We've all been there.
Yeah. Good. So you too, eh? I was just so. I wasn't expecting to get a sort of instant from the first person I reveal this to be saying, yeah, what you mean. So it's not just me. That's great, because I didn't know that. I thought it was just me. So, you know, little devices that you can work out to just head you off the path from the negative stuff. Because if you can head yourself off from the negative bits, which are very demoralizing themselves, because you know you shouldn't have done it, it's not helping you. It's instant gratification, if you like, and then on instant, then beating yourself up for having done it. And it's a sort of a bit of a spiral. You can go, you know, it takes you down. So stop doing those things and remind yourself, if I don't have the cake, I'll feel so much better, and I'll have more, and I can get on with the thing that I've decided I should be doing, which will make me feel really so much better having taken a step along that path than eating that cake. I'm working here, you know, but you get the drift. So when I used to come up over a big pressure ridge, and I stand on the top where two ice floes are crunched together, you're standing about 2, 3, 4 meters up, and you can see about 5 kilometers ahead to the horizon. And it happens every now and again, and you know it would happen, you just didn't know when. And you get to the top, you look at it, and all you could see was pressure ridges all the way for 5 kilometers. You think, well, that's pretty much the end of my expedition. There's no way at half a mile a day for 12 hours of solid sledge pulling, which is what it takes through just chaotic jumbles of ice. Some of them as big as buses, most of them about the size of a Mini, or, you know, all it's very hard to maneuver a very, you know, 20-stone sledge through this, minus 40 or whatever. You just think, that's it. Nature, someone, somewhere, something has put this in my way, and I'm not going to get there. So I had this thing where I come over those and I think, right, into the toolbox. Before it could get a grip of me, and I'd say to myself, it's not a punishment to be here. It's a privilege. And I've worked very hard, and I've given up a great deal to be in this very situation right here, right now, of seeing something difficult. If it was easy, lots of people would have done this long time ago. The whole point of this, if there is a point, is that there are some hard bits and no one has got through them. You're the man, you've done all the training, all the preparation. This is what you're all about for the last 15 years of your life. So embrace it, actually enjoy it. This is it. This is where you can strut your stuff and show how you are, you know, can basically perform at a high, better than anyone has done before. And that shift from all about me, poor little me, and someone, or everything's against me. It's like, seriously, you're not that important, Penn. Actually, no one's bothered with the life of it. And, you know, if there is a God, he's certainly not. We've got better things to do with this time than put these sort of blockages in your way. This is just how it is. Deal with it. I found that these little tools were really valuable.
I like it. You're gesturing almost like they're arrows in your quiver that you can take out and just like shoot through the problem.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like if then. I came up with, I call them, I think it's a military thing actually, special operating procedures, where I try to envisage every possible scenario, psychological, logistical, catastrophic, the boat catches on fire, I catch on fire, you know, whatever. I always
wondered what you would do, Ross, sorry to interrupt you, but I always wondered what happened when, because you take spare oars, but there must occasionally be people in your trade who end up with like one oar or no oars, because they
I broke all my oars on the Atlantic before it even reached halfway.
So do you lean over the front and do doggy paddle, or sort of, you know?
Well, surely you know the wonders of duct tape.
Oh, right. So
duct tape and splints. Anyway, this isn't about me, it's about you. And I realise that we have run out of time and you're a busy man. So I will say thank you so much, Penn, for making the time. I know you're much in demand, so I really appreciate you sharing that. It's been really helpful. And you also reminded me of a few more things that I want to include in the book. So it's been brilliantly helpful. Thank you so much for sharing your time and also sharing that beautiful bird song we could hear in the background. All right, take care. Hope to see you soon.
And good luck to everybody who's listening.
All right, thank you, Pen.